Hi, in this video we are going to talk about a mastery-infused instructional cycle. Now, as you're well aware, we are knee-deep into the work of personalized learning in our district, and a heavy lift in the district this school year is focus on mastery. Now, I imagine you've had some PD this school year about mastery, what it is, what it isn't, the 7 attributes of mastery, some of the implications of what that looks like in the classroom. And many of you are starting to forge a path into the world of having your kids engage in an instructional cycle that's infused with mastery. And you're wondering, what should that look like? I think I'm doing it right. I'm not sure if I'm doing it right. I actually don't even know how to get started. So this video is intended to give you some guidance, some support, some information, maybe some inspiration of what that instructional cycle could and should look like if you're operating in a mastery model. Now let me be clear, what I'm going to show you in this video is not the only way to do this, and it's certainly not the only right way, but it's intended to be a framework, a guideline, a support structure to help you think through the process as you begin to design some instructional cycles that are infused with mastery in your own classroom. So let's get started. As we think about an instructional cycle, there are some kind of, non-negotiable pieces and parts that should be present in the instructional cycle. Things like a pre-assessment, things like data-informed instruction, flexible learning opportunities for kids that allow them opportunities to demonstrate their mastery. If kids find themselves struggling in the process of learning, which we all know they do, what kind of Tier 1 supports are embedded in the classroom to continually support learners as they grapple with and engage with the learning? And then, what kind of experiences or opportunities exist for kids to demonstrate their mastery with enough sufficient evidence that you feel confident to say, yep, this kid's got it. I'm certain that they have mastery level understanding of this particular learning target, and I feel confident that they're ready to interact with a new learning target or to take their learning a little bit deeper. What does that look like in the classroom? These fundamental cornerstones are cyclical in nature, and so they just kind of stop, rewind, repeat, stop, rewind, repeat, stop, rewind, repeat as kids continue to cycle through the process of learning. Now, you might be looking at these terms and thinking, ooh, gosh, I actually don't know what these things mean. And that's okay if you don't. So let's take a minute and just define the terms. I'm not going to read this slide to you, but I'll give you an awkward moment of silence for you to read it for yourself. So there are some definitions for each of those terms. We have these definitions also available to you in a one-page document that you could print off and put in your personalized learning binder or somewhere in your classroom for a point of reference if you'd like these terms and definitions accessible to you at the ready. We can get you that information. One more thing I want to talk about before we jump into the cycle is these 4 terms right here. This next slide I'm about to show you, this is what they look like when they operate together. So you can see we've got data-informed instruction at the top, okay? And then we've got these little squares, SG, we're calling those small groups. And then those small groups, once they've engaged with, some teacher support and learning, they have some demonstrations of mastery. If there's sufficient demonstration of mastery, then kids get a dual opportunity to demonstrate mastery in a way that allows for some voice and choice and flexibility. And then when kids have sufficient evidence of learning, they can then exit the learning target or engage with the learning target at a deeper level. This whole chunk together is like one instructional phase, just so you could see it kind of holistically. Here's the pieces and parts in isolation, but this is what it looks like when it's all clumped together. Okay, so let's get into the work and let's start to deconstruct the pieces and parts of this mastery-infused instructional cycle. Like I mentioned earlier, your cycle should start with some kind of pre-assessment. The pre-assessment could be, something digital on the computer. It could be an iReady Standards Mastery. Maybe it's something Procore. Maybe it's something on Schoology. Maybe it's a paper pencil assessment. Maybe it's something that's locally designed by your department or your grade level team, or perhaps it's something far less formal and a bit more informal. Irregardless of what it is, there needs to be some kind of pre-assessment. For the purposes of this video, let's just use my daughter Emily. So let's say Emily, who's a third grader, takes this pre-assessment and she gets an 85%, a greater than 80. Emily more than likely does not need a whole lot of additional instruction. I mean, prior to any instruction, she's already demonstrated that she's got a decent level of mastery. And so it's our recommendation that if that was the case, Emily would be given a learning opportunity that's mastery-based, but it has some flexibility. Now this is where voice and choice lives for kids. This is where the teacher would pull up Emily's personal learner profile and they would see, gosh, she's a kid who really loves to read and write and draw and does art. I wonder if we could create an opportunity for Emily to express her learning in a way that taps into her interests and the things that she's, naturally drawn to. In this phase of the learning, this is also the place where student rubrics or checklists would live. All of those pieces and parts of learner-centeredness exist in this phase of the learning. Okay? Once Emily's had an opportunity for this, to demonstrate mastery, we would check that demonstration of mastery against learning progression. And if she's had sufficient evidence of learning from her pre-assessment, sufficient evidence of learning from this flexible opportunity we've been given her, then we could say, check, Emily's got mastery level evidence of this standard, of this learning target. Now, at that point in time, Emily could exit the learning target and move on to the next learning target. Or if the learning target had an opportunity for exceeding mastery or enrichment opportunities, Emily could go deeper into the standard. That's your professional discretion. That might also be a building-based decision, but we would say at this point in time, Emily has shown sufficient evidence of mastering the standard in dual demonstration. Her pre-assessment was her first demonstration of learning, and her flexible learning opportunity was her second demonstration of learning. So we would say that Emily is good to go with that particular learning target. Now, that's a perfect world. Let's assume that Emily did not do very well in her pre-assessment. Let's say that Emily got a 65%. Okay? At that point in time, the teacher would look at the students who did not reach levels of mastery on their pre-assessment, and the teacher would start to group those kids together by like need or similar needs. And as you can see, I said 5 small groups. Doesn't have to be 5. It could be 3. It could be 4. Probably shouldn't be like 10 or 12. That's not manageable. But the teacher's going to look at the kids who need some instruction that's based around the data from their pre-assessment, and the teacher's going to intervene in small group instruction. Okay? Now this is where teacher feedback comes into play. Okay, this is where the components of UDL, universal design, come into play. Kids should have opportunities to access the learning in multiple ways. They should have opportunities to engage with the learning in multiple ways. Again, this is where student rubrics and checklists and learning progressions come into play. All of this lives in this small group instruction, and it's our recommendation that you embrace a workshop model during this time of instruction. It seems to be a reliable and effective way of meeting with small groups of students while giving all the other students learning opportunities that are autonomous and at their level. So once kids have received small group instruction, they then get an attempt to demonstrate their mastery. Now, kids could say to the teacher, Mrs. Mack, I understand the instruction. I get what you're telling me. Everything's starting to click. I really think I get it. This is making sense. I want to show you what I know. Kids can advocate for that, or you, the teacher, can say, you know what? You've been working really hard in small group instruction. It seems like things are really clicking. I think I'm ready. It seems to me like you're ready to show me what you know. That's at your discretion. It could be a teacher decision. It could be a student decision. But at some point in time, the learner needs an opportunity to make an attempt at demonstrating their mastery. Okay? Let's say that child is my daughter, Emily. The cycle repeats. If she has sufficient evidence in that attempt at mastery, then she gets a flexible opportunity where that voice and choice comes into play. Another way for her to have a learning experience or a learning application that's flexible and driven by choice. And again, at that point in time, she could exit the learning target, just like before, or she could go deeper into the learning target and work towards some enrichment or exceeding mastery opportunities if they exist. Okay? But let's say after that attempt at mastery, it's still not clicking for Emily. Okay? That's fine. It's okay if it's not. But the learning doesn't stop. Okay? Emily goes into a small group instruction model again. And if you notice, the color changed. See how everything thus far was kind of in a purplish tone? We're going to call that phase 1 of the learning. Okay? But Emily's still struggling. She still needs to engage with the learning, and she still needs teacher support. And so she's about to enter into phase 2 of the mastery cycle. Okay, so here we are in phase 2 of the learning. Okay? Emily had an attempt to demonstrate mastery of her learning target. It didn't go so well, which is fine. We know that that happens with kids. We'd be fooling ourselves if we think that kids get, 1 or 2 doses of small group instruction and everything sticks and everything clicks and the world is perfect and kids go on their merry way. We know that's not the case. Many kids need multiple opportunities and the gift of time to continue to engage with the learning until things finally start to fall into place. So that's what this next phase of the cycle is, the mastery cycle is. We're going to call this phase 2. So now you'll notice kids still go back into small group, but instead of having, my previous example had 5 small groups, now we only have 3. And I think it's important to note that, again, the number of groups is irrelevant, but in each cycle or each phase of the cycle, the number of students should be lessening, should be diminishing. It should be, growing smaller and smaller because each cycle of instruction should be reaching more and more learners. So you'll notice that the number of small groups should be diminishing, should be getting smaller. So Emily didn't perform very well in her formative attempt. She's in small group instruction again, which is just fine. This is where growth mindset really starts to come into play. In that not yet phase of learning. When we talk about MASTERY, the Y is the yet, the not yet. This is when kids are not yet there. They're not yet mastery. They may be approaching mastery, but they're not yet. So this is really where that lives and breathes. It's also important to note that when you're in phase 2 of the Mastery Infused instructional cycle, teachers have to do something different than what they did in phase 1. Obviously, the instruction that was given to the learner in phase 1 wasn't quite right. Something about it didn't stick, it didn't make sense. And so we have got to tackle the learning differently in phase 2. Okay? But much like last time, the kids engage in small group instruction. Okay? And when the learner feels as if they're ready to show you what they know, or you, the teacher, feel as though your perception is that the child is ready to show you what you know, the student gets another attempt to demonstrate mastery. Now, this is their second attempt, because remember, they're still engaged in the first learning target that we started with. They had a pre-assessment, it didn't go well. They had a first attempt, it didn't go well. Now we're at our second attempt. Okay, same learning target, but multiple attempts. Okay, just like last time. If that attempt at mastery goes well, then the child gets an opportunity to demonstrate their learning in a way that is flexible. Again, this is where the voice and choice comes into play. Okay, and then an opportunity to exit the learning target or have some enrichment opportunities for exceeding mastery. Okay, if that second attempt at demonstrating learning doesn't go well, and it may not, okay, that's okay. Kids continue to re-engage with the learning cycle. We do not stop. We keep going, but every time we re-engage with the learning, we have to come at it from a different angle, okay? Now, if you notice the change in color, first it was purple, phase 1. Then it was blue, phase 2. Now it's orange, phase 3, okay? Things are getting a little different now, okay? Because kids are about to enter into phase 3 of the mastery cycle, okay? When kids are in phase 3 of the mastery cycle, the teacher needs to be extremely intentional about small group supports, okay? At this point in time, the child has had multiple opportunities to demonstrate mastery of the target, and they're just not quite there yet. They're still a not yet. They're approaching. We've got to be really systematic about our approaches with kids at this point. What does the child need? This is the time to dig into the PLP. Okay, is this child a kind of child who needs tactile approaches? Do they need auditory? What does this child need? This is where you really have to customize learning for kids, because they're really starting to struggle at this point. Okay. But much like last time, they get another attempt to demonstrate mastery. Okay. If that goes well, they get an opportunity to demonstrate their mastery or their levels of learning in ways that have some flexibility, some voice and choice. Again, they can exit the learning target, okay? Or they can go deeper into the target for some exceeding mastery opportunities, okay? If attempt number 3 doesn't go well, we are at the point in the process of learning with this child where we need some intensive systematic supports, okay? We should have very few of our learners who fall into this bottom bucket. If we're doing a mastery infused instructional cycle well with fidelity, each round of the cycle, each phase of the cycle, we should be exiting kids, because each phase of the cycle, more and more learners are demonstrating mastery. When you get to this bottom rung, and you've got these intensive systematic supports, these are kids who probably are going to pop up maybe at MTSS. You're going to want to use some evidence-based, research-based, instructional strategies in the classroom with these kids. This is the time where you call upon your support staff in your building. Maybe you go talk to an IS or your reading intervention specialist, or maybe a literacy director or someone. If you have kids that fall into this intensive systematic support phase of the learning cycle. They're really, really struggling. So this is the time to really rally around kiddo. And so that's it in a nutshell. This is it was intended to be a brief, but it turned into a semi-lengthy overview of the Mastery Infused Instructional Cycle. That could be one possible, implementation model for your classrooms here in Marysville. Like I said at the beginning of the video, this isn't the only way to do this, but this is one proposed framework for you to consider as you embark on the journey towards creating mastery opportunities for learners in your classroom. I imagine that this video probably provokes lots of questions or wonderings for you. Hopefully it inspired your thinking a little bit, but certainly I imagine you have some questions. Feel free always to reach out to Ashley Thompson and myself, Heather Mack, for support. Your instructional coaches, we're all here to support you, and it's our intention to flank you with what you need so that you can be successful in the classroom. So please make sure that you ask for help if you need it, and we are eager and excited to get into your classrooms this year and see this mastery-infused instructional cycle come to life. Thanks.